Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. At least 40 people have been killed in a series of bombings in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. The first 3 bombs went off consecutively in a Shiite neighborhood, resulting in dozens of deaths and over 80 injuries. It was the worst violence to hit Iraq in months. A U.S. contractor working on education projects was killed in a separate attack. President Obama met with soldiers in upstate New York Thursday as part of his effort to drum up support for his plan on maintaining the Afghan war. Obama has announced he will scale back his troop surge, but will keep a large force in Afghanistan until 2014. Obama told soldiers there's still some fighting to be done.
Our job is not finished. If you looked at the schedule that I set forth, we're only bringing out 10,000 by the end of this year. We're going to bring out all 33,000 that we surged by next summer. But there's still some fighting to be done.
President Obama spoke as military leaders appeared before Congress to discuss the Afghan war. The chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, admitted to having reservations about ending the troop surge this year.
I do not intend to discuss the specifics of the private advice I rendered with respect to these decisions. As I said, I support them. What I can tell you is the President's decisions are more aggressive and incur more risk than I was originally prepared to accept. More force for more time is, without doubt, the safer course.
Undersecretary of Defense Michelle Flournoy, meanwhile, reminded lawmakers the U.S. troop force in Afghanistan will still be larger than when Obama took office.
Even after the recovery of the surge forces, totaling about 33,000 troops, we will still have 68,000 U.S. service members in Afghanistan. That is more than twice the number as when President Obama took office. Clearly, this is not a rush to the exits that will jeopardize our security gains. More importantly, at the end of summer 2012, when all of the surge forces are out, there will actually be more Afghan and coalition forces in the fight than there are today.
In other congressional testimony, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton addressed the Obama administration's recent acknowledgement of holding preliminary talks with the Taliban.
The United States has a broad range of contacts at many levels across Afghanistan and the region that we are leveraging to support this effort, including very preliminary outreach to members of the Taliban. This is not a pleasant business, but a necessary one, because history tells us that a combination of military pressure, economic opportunity, and an inclusive political and diplomatic process is the best way to end insurgencies.
The House is expected to vote today on up to 3 measures concerning the war on Libya. The proposals would either restrict or end offensive operations as well as withdraw funding. The Obama administration's criticized the congressional opposition. On Thursday, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said, quote, "The bottom line is, whose side are you on? Are you on Gaddafi's side, or are you on the side of the aspirations of the Libyan people and the international coalition that's been created to support them?" The Senate Armed Services Committee has advanced a sweeping measure establishing new guidelines for the detention of prisoners in the so-called war on terror. The new rules would establish a system of hearings for military judges to determine the status of prisoners captured abroad. The provision would apply to foreign prisons such as the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, where the U.S. is jailing over 1,700 people without trial. Another rule would mandate military detention for anyone suspected of being a high-value al-Qaeda suspect, excluding U.S. citizens. Human Rights Watch has denounced that provision, saying, quote, "Mandatory military detention is what martial law states do, not democracies." The U.S. and other Western countries have agreed to tap their oil reserves for only the 3rd time in history. The International Energy Agency will release over 60 million barrels over the next month, half of that amount coming from the United States. Democratic Congress member Ed Markey called the move a signal to rival oil-producing countries.
Because of the reduction in the amount of oil coming in from Libya, because of the amount of oil that's now been taken off the market in Yemen, this is the right time to strike, to make a statement that we are not going to allow the markets to be disrupted. And that's a signal to Iran, to Venezuela, and others that we are going to fight back, that they will not be able to exploit this opportunity to hold prices high.
Republicans have pulled out of bipartisan talks on increasing the debt limit ahead of an August 2nd deadline when the government's expected to reach its $14.3 trillion borrowing cap. Republicans had been meeting with Vice President Joe Biden, but are now insisting on direct talks with President Obama. Democrats are seeking to boost revenue by introducing up to $400 billion in taxes on corporations and the wealthy, while Republicans are pushing for deep spending cuts. Relatives of Mexicans killed in Mexico's drug war have had an extraordinary public spat with Mexican President Felipe Calderón. On Thursday, a group of family members who've lost loved ones to the drug fight met with Calderón in Mexico City. The group included the poet Javier Sicilia, who has become the spokesperson for a growing anti-violence movement in Mexico, following his son Juan's torture and murder. At a joint news conference with Calderón and other family members, Cecilia called on Calderón to apologize for the tens of thousands who've died in Mexico's drug war.
The Mexican state is failing in its obligation to protect its people and defend their rights. That is why, Mr. President, in your state role, you are responsible, together with the state governments, for the deaths of 40,000 people, thousands of missing and orphaned. We have come here firstly so that the Mexican state recognizes its debt with the victims, their families, and society. As a representative of the state, Mr. President, who are obliged to apologize to the nation, in particular to the victims.
In response, President Calderón defended his militarization of the drug fight, saying intensified operations could have saved the life of Cecilia's son.
En eso, Javier, sí estás equivocado.
Javier, you are mistaken. Yes, we should apologize for people who have died at the hands of criminals, for not having acted against those criminals. If I regret something, it's not having sent federal security forces to fight against criminals, who nobody used to confront because they were scared of them, because they have been bought. I also regret not sending them before and not having had a fair operation in Cuernavaca to catch them before they killed Francisco.
The Obama administration's warning U.S. peace activists not to join the upcoming aid flotilla to break the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. In a new travel advisory, the State Department tells Americans not to travel to Gaza, including by sea, citing the Israeli killing of 9 people in the First Freedom Flotilla just over a year ago. The warning was issued after members of the U.S. delegation called on the White House to back their safe passage. In a statement, flotilla passenger Haggett Borer said, quote, apparently the State Department subscribes to the view that Israel's anticipated violence against unarmed protesters is an immutable act of nature. We'll be covering the voyage of the Audacity of Hope. That's the U.S. flagship that will carry about 50 Americans, part of a larger flotilla that's challenging the Israeli blockade on Gaza. A Pulitzer-winning journalist who worked for The Washington Post has publicly admitted he's an undocumented immigrant. In a lengthy New York Times Magazine article, José Antonio Vargas said he has been hiding his true immigration status for nearly 20 years, causing him great personal turmoil. Originally from the Philippines, Vargas's mother put him on a plane to the U.S. when he was 12 years old in the hopes of giving him a better life. In a videotaped message for his new project called Define American, Vargas said he hopes to spark discussion around the issue of immigration.
I'm an American. I just don't have the right papers. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I'm sorry for the laws that I broke. What would you do if you were a choir teacher and found out that a student in your glee club can't travel for a competition? What would you do if you were a high school principal and found out that one of your students can't apply for financial aid? What would you do if your child's best friend didn't have papers? As a journalist, I've decided to do what I know best: ask questions.
Jose Antonio Vargas says he was inspired to come forward by DREAM Act activists who publicly declared their undocumented status in an effort to pass legislation allowing undocumented children a path to citizenship. New Jersey lawmakers have pushed through radical cuts to the benefits and wages of public workers over heavy protest. On Thursday, the New Jersey Assembly approved a massive rollback of benefits for over 750,000 government workers and retirees. The measure will sharply increase workers' contributions for health insurance and pensions, raise the age of retirement, freeze cost of living increases for pension checks, and restrict unions' collective bargaining rights. In a scene reminiscent of similar efforts nationwide, thousands of people rallied at the State House in Trenton to protest the cuts. Demonstrators carried signs and chanted slogans criticizing Democratic lawmakers for siding with Republican Governor Chris Christie to ensure the bill's passage. The New Jersey State Senate is expected to approve the measure on Monday. Meanwhile, here in New York, the state's largest public employee union has agreed to new cutbacks in a bid to avert mass layoffs. The Civil Service Employees Association and Governor Andrew Cuomo have reached a deal that includes a 3-year wage freeze, an increase to health insurance premiums, and the first furloughs ever for New York State workers. Amidst the new setbacks for public workers, thousands of nurses have staged a protest on Wall Street, demanding a new tax on the financial sector. The nurses and other public workers are calling on banking giants to pay a small fee on transactions involving trades, derivatives, and other financial instruments as a way to boost public coffers, while also curbing speculative actions that caused the nation's financial crisis. National Nurses United Executive Director Roseanne DeMoro addressed the crowd.
Just like working people pay taxes on all of their purchases, that these yo-yos who buy and sell our country should pay a minimum tax on that. That money, a very minimum tax could amount to at least $350 billion that can go back to our communities, that can go back to jobs, that can go back to health care.
Among the signs carried by nurses was one reading, "Heal America, Tax Wall Street." Former Vice President Al Gore has issued a lengthy public critique of President Obama's policies on climate change. Writing in the magazine Rolling Stone, Gore says, quote, "President Obama has thus far failed to use the bully pulpit to make the case for bold action on climate change," taking him to task for lack of a binding agreement at Copenhagen, the failure of his Green Jobs bill, and the White House support for offshore drilling. Gore concludes that only sustained public pressure will force meaningful government action on the environment, writing, quote, "When enough people care passionately enough about the climate crisis, politicians will look at their whole cards, and enough of them will change their game to make all the difference we need," he said. The mothers of 2 American hikers detained in Iran since 2009 have resumed a rolling hunger strike in protest of the pair's upcoming trial. Shane Bauer and Josh Fatal were due in court last month, but the Iranian government unexpectedly postponed the case. Their next hearing has been rescheduled for July 31st, the 2-year anniversary of their arrest while hiking near Iran-Iraq border. Bauer and Fatal's mothers, Laura Fatal and Cindy Hickey, will be joined in the hunger strike by supporters including the former Colombian hostage Ingrid Betancourt and peace activist Ella Gandhi, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.